Creepy school bus. At the time this happened, I was about 16 years old and living in a small mountain town. I was driving to my friend's house one night after youth group. She lived on the darker, more rural outskirts of town. I was at a stoplight in the middle of town when I see a small school bus pull up behind me. I thought nothing of it, because sometimes smaller buses were used for sporting events. I continued about my driving, blaring my music, and just driving the familiar roads that were there. About 5 minutes later, when things start to get a bit more rural, I noticed that the bus is still there. I was a bit more on high alert now, because we were far away from the schools, and it made no sense for the bus to come out this way. Now, there wasn't many options for twists and turns in this part of town, so I just stayed my course. Within a minute or so of getting me this bad feeling, the bus starts creeping up and almost touching my bumper. I officially fucking panicked. This was when cell phones weren't awesome like they are now, and of course my Nokia was out of minutes. I start slowing down, hoping the bus will just pass me. No such luck. Instead, the fucker inside this thing turns the lights off and stays uncomfortably close. I'm getting close to my friend's house, but don't want to lead this asshole to her house. I decide I'll get close enough to her house where I can run there in an absolute emergency, but to just drive around the area to see if I could ditch the bus. I turn into a street about half a mile from my friend's house, and thank my lucky stars, there's a cop parked on the side of the street. I look in my rearview mirror in time to see the bus pass nonchalantly, and notice that only the front of the bus was yellow. The rest was white, with windows painted over. I made it safely to my friend's house, but stalker in the murder bus, let's not meet. School bus creep. To start this off, I've had two very creepy encounters in my life. This was the first of them. At the time, I was about 11 years old and in the 6th grade. I also developed very early, which might be important. I'm not sure he would have done this if he had known how young I really was. I had always lived in a small sort of country town, and school had started early. One day, I was waiting for the bus. I had been the only one there, and then we had a neighbor in our small apartment complex, so he came out to wait for the bus as well. We started talking for a few minutes, and this became a normal routine for a few months. We just talked some before the school bus came about anything really. Well, one day during Christmas break, he knocked on my door and asked if I wanted to come out to hang out with him and play in the snow. I think he might have some sort of mental problem because he acted always strangely childish. It was starting to get dark outside. My parents never minded because we'd always stay in the tiny apartment complex as long as I checked in every hour or so. We were walking in the snow and he started to talk about things that struck me as weird. Also, he was in high school, I think a sophomore. Sorry, I'm not a good storyteller, and this is sort of important, and the high school and middle school kids share the bus. He was saying how sometimes girl would walk out of the bathroom and he'd grab their crotches and they'd moan. Then he said how badly he wanted to lose his virginity, but was Christian, so he would have to wait until he was married. I ignored all of this, every single bit of this, hoping to stray from the subject really. At this time, we were behind some of the apartments, and he asked me if I wanted him to grab my crotch. I said no, and told him I didn't really want to talk about this at all, but he rushed at me and put all his weight on me to press me against the wall, calling me a slut and saying how I wanted it. He was a pretty big guy and I was really small. He started to shove my face into the brick wall and hump me from behind. That's when I began screaming as loud as I could. That made him run, and I ran to my house, which thank God was only about 30 to 40 feet away. Once I got inside, I locked the door. I seemed very distressed, so my mom asked me what was wrong, and I just told her that I thought I saw a bear or something, which is really common around there in that area. The next time I saw him, at the bus stop for the school bus, I told him never to talk to me or never to touch me again, and he didn't say anything but just laid off. A few months after that, he was actually arrested for sexual molestation and disappeared from my life. I feel bad for whoever actually took action because I felt if I had spoken up, it would not have happened again. But overall, I was just happy that he got what he deserved. Creepy school bus driver. Hi, thanks for reading. Been reading some of the other posts, so I thought I would share my story. Just a bit of background information. I am 25 years old, female. This happened between ages 15 and 16. Growing up, my family and I lived in a pretty rural area. By high school was 25 minutes away by car, so you can't imagine a bus ride was even longer, took about a full hour. I had the same bus driver from middle school until I eventually got my license and could drive myself to school. He was the driver for the route I lived on for a long time, even after I didn't ride the bus anymore. The bus driver was, a little too friendly towards me sometimes. He was a man maybe in his mid-40s, and had one of those 70s porn star mustaches, balding stereotypical bus driver look I suppose. Anyways, I had to catch the bus at 6:30 a.m. in the morning, and my house was a good mile away from the bus stop, so I had to be out the door before then. Most days, I would just get up, shower, and fix my hair and head out. It was a long bus ride, so my friend who lived at the next stop and I always just did our makeup on the bus. Why not, right? Saved me from waking up earlier than I already had to. Sometimes getting off the bus, Carl would say things like, "Oh, you look so beautiful today," and whatnot. It was a little creepy, but I wasn't concerned. I was always allowed to have food and drinks on the bus when the other kids weren't, so I guess that part kinda worked out in my favor, I think. That kind of stuff went on all through my first 2 years of high school. Usually, I was one of the last people on the bus because, well, I was one of the last stops. It was always just really awkward, always trying to make small talk and just be overly friendly. He even asked me one time if I just wanted him to drop me off at my house because I was the last person on the bus. Remember, my house is a mile walk from the actual stop. No thanks. I lied and said someone would be coming to get me from the bus stop. Didn't need that creep to know where I lived exactly. I'd usually sit in the back and ask him to turn the music up, so of course he would try and talk to me about music. I had mentioned to him in one of his awkward small talk conversations that he was trying to have with me that I really like classic rock, Pink Floyd, etc. One day, getting off the bus, and Carl hands me a mixed CD he made for me. To me, that was weird. I don't know, like, what the fuck? You're my bus driver. I don't know you. All you do is drive me back and forth to school. He put weird-ass songs on it too, like The Love Shack. I tried to kinda downplay it, like, oh, he's just being nice, but thought it was, well, kinda weird, really. Fast forward to after I get my driver's license, finally, I don't have to ride the bus anymore. Sometimes I would pass by the school bus, and of course, there was Carl, waving at me. Driving the school bus once again. Oh, well though, no big deal, right? So I'm at work one weekend at McDonald's, and in walks Carl with some kid that was maybe 8 or 9 years old. He said, "Oh, how you doing, blah blah blah, miss you on the bus, blah blah blah." Then me smiling and being polite, but really I'm like, please just shut the fuck up, please. Then I gave him his food and he sat down. He stayed in there with that poor kid for like a full hour. Who stays at a fast food joint that long anyways? Okay, maybe some people do, but there was just something weird to me about him being there forever. Finally, Carl leaves. Not even 10 minutes later, he comes back in without the kid up to the counter and says to me, "Are you getting off soon? My car won't start and I was wondering if you could give me a ride home." My heart started pounding. I was just like, All I could picture was me dead in some ditch. Then he said, "I only live 15 minutes away." Finally, I just lied and said I wouldn't be getting off for a few hours, but really I was shitting my pants because I would be getting off work in about 10 minutes. I told my boss, and he had someone walk me out to my car. When I got home, I told my mom what had happened. She was really upset and called the bus barn for the school district, where he worked out of. The lady on the phone had told my mom that apparently the school district bus drivers were all having a food drive at the local grocery store, which shared a parking lot with McDonald's. They were literally right next to each other, and he knew they were there. There was even a big yellow bus out there that had the school district's name on it. She said he could have easily walked the 200 feet and asked one of those people who he works with and asked them for a ride. It was just really weird. I don't know what would have happened if I gave him a ride, but all sorts of bells and whistles were going off in my head when he asked. It just wasn't right. I saw Carl about 4 years after that when I was working at a sporting goods store. As soon as I saw him, I was just kinda like, "Really? I'm not done seeing you." He came up to me and grabbed me and gave me a big hug. It was weird. After that, I was on the lookout, and anytime I saw him come into the store, I hid. The last time I saw him was 5 years ago, thank God. My brother, who also rode his bus back in the day, would see him at the sporting goods store he worked at frequently as well. Carl would always say hello, but quickly would make me the topic of conversation. "Oh, how's your sister? Where's she working now?" All this was up until about a year ago, when my brother quit the sporting goods store he worked at. It was a really weird experience. Obviously, the guy's a little off.